Hey, this is Jody with weldingtipsandtricks.com. Today I'm going to be TIG welding up a little product from swagoffroad.com. It's an adapter clamp that adapts a air over hydraulic ram available from Harbor Freight to several different models of tubing benders like JD Squared, JMR, and Pro Tools tubing benders. So it just makes bending tubing a little easier. So this is made out of high strength A572 steel. It's no toy. If you get one, you'll be pleasantly surprised at how substantial and heavy duty it is. So here's the kit laid out on the table, ready to weld. It's got laser cut surfaces. It's broke over using a CNC press brake, so it's very accurate, ready to weld up. It's like a little Lego kit or something. It just all snaps in place and you tack it and you weld it. But there's a couple of ways I could go about this. I could tack it up here and here and here and here and then take this part off and weld it while it's easier to get to. However, if I do that, it's probably going to draw those tabs in and make it a little hard to get back in place. So I'm just going to tack it up and weld it all in place and do it that way. Because you can see right here, it's just going to be just a little tight and a little weird getting the TIG torch in there. So I'm going to give it a wipe down with acetone, and then I'm going to drag my stool over that I made a few videos ago. And you remember that time when I made that stool and I said it was kind of hard, so I was going to soften it up a little bit. That was really funny, man. That was a really good joke. Alright, so maybe it wasn't a good joke, but anyway, we're getting back to business here. I'm going to get the first tack on here, and you can see my torch looks a little bit unique. That's because it is a CK flex lock torch that swivels 360 degrees, so I can swivel this thing and get any angle I want, and that's going to be really helpful on this job today. So I'm going to get pop a little tack just on that tubing to the bracket, and then just a little fusion tack over here just to keep that tubing from sliding to and fro, and then I'll get a tack on one of the brackets. And when I do that, if you're watching closely, you'll see the other side kind of pull up a little bit. Well, I should have probably placed it in a little bit different area, but I didn't, so it pulled up like that. So now what I've got to do before I get the other tack on there, I could probably just hold it down with one hand and do a fusion tack with the other, but since I've got this table with all the clamps and everything on it, I'm just throw one clamp here and another clamp over here to hold it down, lock it down good and tight, and get that other tack on there. So now that I've got it all tacked up, it's ready to go. Now, first thing I'm going to do is weld around the round tubing part here. Now, this little swivel head, again, a flex lock torch by CK, lets me get any angle I want. So when I'm poking this torch in there, I don't have the right electrode angle, but at least I can get the right head angle where I can get in there. And first thing I'm going to do is go like that, and then I'm going to pick up where I started and come around like this. So let's just do that. I'm using a lay wire technique. I'm using a 3/32 ER 70S2 filler wire with a 2% lanthanated electrode. I'm just leaving the rod in the puddle. I'm using about 125 amps and just using a little oscillation of the torch, a little weave technique, and I'm keeping a little pressure on the filler rod and letting the puddle take a little bit if it will. Not trying to force it in there. I'm just trying to make a nice little even weave for this weld here, and it comes out pretty decent. Now, a good thing about a gas lens like this is that you can extend the electrode out a lot farther than you can with a conventional style cup and collet body. So for getting back in there where I've got to reach back in there to where I started, it's going to come in handy. Also, it's getting kind of warm now, so if I'm going to prop on the part, I need to do something like this, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to prop on that. I'm going to swivel it around just like that and see how that works out. Now, torch electrode angle is not ideal, but that is the real world. That is the way things work. You're not going to always have the ideal angle. You hope you do, but you won't always, and so you kind of got to compensate a little bit. Now for welding these brackets on, see, I can prop on the table like this if I want to, and I can get the right angle easily by swapping it around like this. And that really does help if I want to prop on the table and not prop on a hot part. And I know that somebody commented on one of my YouTube videos about it was like a code violation to burn the stamped end off a rod, but I'm not welding to code here today, and when I get ready to hit record on the camera and I accidentally have the other end oxidized, I'm not going to stop, so I just burn off that end. So it's easier to get forgiveness than permission sometimes, right? I just do it. Alright, you see that angle? You don't get that angle on just any torch. And if I want to prop on the part coming the other direction, I'd change the angle on the torch to favor that direction. Again, just keeping a little pressure on the filler wire. You can see it occasionally ball up, and I just put a little pressure on it and make it feed back in the puddle. You don't want it balling up and blobbing in. You want it feeding in. Makes a prettier weld if you can feed it instead of blob it. Now for these outside corner joints, same thing. I can either prop on the table or I can prop on the part. Just depends on what works best for me. In this case, I'm going to prop on the part because it puts me a little closer to the tip and lets me hold it a little steadier. Same thing here though, about 125 amps, and I'm just pushing that rod just a little pressure in the puddle, so if it wants to take a little filler, I'm going to give it a little filler. I'm just trying to kind of consume those corners and flow everything into there in one pass. You could also do a joint like this in two passes, which we'll do a little bit later. Now this would obviously be a lot quicker just MIG welding it up, but I just decided to TIG weld today just because I got another video coming out where I do stick and MIG on these things. So there we go. Now, a lot of people ask about pulse welding. I use high-speed pulse sometimes. You see how the top corner, the puddle is trying, it wants to wick up and melt away that top corner. It just kind of wants to do that. That is a benefit of high-speed pulse. Like when I say high-speed pulsing, I'm not talking about 2, 4, 10 pulses a second. I'm talking about above 30. So here's a 33 pulses a second, 33 background, and 30% on time, and you see it just does make a little difference. Anytime you're welding near an edge, high-speed pulse like that makes a little difference. Not night and day difference, just a little difference, but these little differences add up at the end of the day. And I went ahead and left the pulse on. You see I got a little fuzz on the tip of my electrode there, but it's still doing okay. But I went ahead and left the pulse on for doing a little weave joint on a second pass. Alright, looking pretty decent. Again, sometimes TIG welding's a lot slower, but there is no cleanup at the end. So I did stick weld a couple of these things, and actually I think the TIG welding went faster because of just no cleanup. Alright, well that is it for today's video. But if you're thinking about getting a tubing bender, a JMR, a JD squared, or a Pro Tools that works with this thing, go over to swagoffroad.com and check it out. He has got some good stuff.